Welcome back to the Chaotic Cast TV. Today we will be learning more about Manola and the world of Ridalian from the DM himself, Evan Arnold. Let's start off with, what was the overall inspiration to the initial thoughts and design of the world?
I didn't know you had such a radio voice, but so the overall inspiration to the design is probably just like a complete collaboration of all things fantasy that I've ever been a part of. So, I mean, I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan, huge Star Wars fan, huge Marvel the Marvel Universe stuff. When we were younger, we played the Witcher games, Dragon Age, the Elder Scroll games, Mass Effect. I mean, just any kind of like role-playing style adventure is probably my inspiration. Read some books and different things, some shows that have come out like Game of Thrones, and I don't really know. The overall inspiration for the whole world is just like a collaboration of everything I grew up with fantasy-wise.
The last 25 years of our lives put together, pretty much.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and I think that it's been awesome just to be able to take all of those fantasy things that I love and then put them together to develop a story that I get to tell with friends. So the overall inspiration for Ridalian was, okay, I want to put this world together. I'm going to design the creation through present time, where it is now and where we're at in the campaign. Multiple campaigns really, because we've played through several. So I think that it's my inspiration was you guys as players, number one, because I incorporated things that I knew you all liked. Things that you all look for in video games, or you all look for in stories, and the hooks and the things that make fantasy and adventure fun for you all, I get to build into my world, and then I also get to include what makes it fun for me, build it into my world. So the inspiration is really you guys, other groups that I've watched, such as Realm Smith and Critical Role, and those type of guys, to see how they DM, and whether it's a complete homebrew world or it's already like a D&D printed world, one of the Forgotten Realms or whatever. I don't know. I would say my collaboration is just a complete cluster of everything fantasy. So I couldn't give like one definite answer like, yeah, this is my inspiration, because it's just a complete cluster of people, books, movies, TV shows, friends, family, all of it.
I know it's always one thing I go back to whenever we talk about everything that we've done, getting this stuff ready or whatever.
Yeah.
Is anytime anybody's asking, like, well, what is the game you're actually playing or whatever? It's like, you think of anything with these different races, classes, monsters or whatever, but all of it comes back to D&D. That's always just like a good little blanket over everything.
Yeah, I think that you can find a little bit of anything fantasy inside of D&D if you want to. And that's the cool thing, is like, if you want to, you don't have to, it's just if you want to.
And the next question, what made you choose the pantheon of gods, goddesses for the world?
So, when I was making Ridalian, before Ridalian even had its name, I wanted to bring it... So, even though it's fantasy, and I understand it's fantasy, and that means mythical, fantastical nonsense can happen, and it's real in this fantasy world, non-reality. But one of the things I want to do is, even though it is fantasy, and we have magic, and we have creatures and monsters, and all these different beings, and beasts, and gods, and goddesses, and all these different things that take part to build the universe and the world of what it is, I still wanted it to make sense for me, for story purposes. So when I was going through to put this world together, I started collecting, different gods from all different things. And that's what's cool about Homebrew, is I can pull from wherever I want. I'm not limited to certain things. And, I have Viking background heritage things, like where we've done our ancestry stuff or whatever. So I have like the old gods, you could say, is very like Nordic in Ridalian. You're gonna have like Thor, Freya, Baldur, Loki, Odin, Ymir. You got all of those that had their part because that's important to me. So that's kind of like something I get to put in. But then also, I wanted to have the staple D&D gods because I feel like certain ones like Bahamut. I'll just give this tidbit in Ridalian. I kind of have supreme gods. You could call them that. And there's a big, good and evil or bad and good. Whatever you want to say. But there's a tension between Bahamut, who is like on the upright gods, versus Bane, who is on the fallen gods. So you got the upright and the fallen gods within Ridalian. And what's cool is Bahamut and Bane, if you were to play as the D&D books have it set, they're not ever going to be in the same realm, same setting, unless you put them, because they are in two different sections. But
right,
the characteristics of Bahamut made sense for what I wanted him, what role I wanted him to play in the creation and formulation of the world, but also an equal, and I'm sure you will hear me say this over and over because I think it's the coolest thing. Everything good or bad has an equal, opposite, I forget the actual, there's somewhere, but anyway, everything's equal. So if you have some supreme being that's awesome and can do everything supremely good, there is an equal and opposite bad being that can do everything bad and counter this other person. So what that does is that doesn't give any god or goddess or demon or devil or whatever in Ridalian like an upper hand. No one is safe, and I love that. I love the aspect of D&D that death is a very real thing. So Bahamut knows that Bane can best him, but Bane at the same time also knows Bahamut has already bested him. So it's a interconnected, intertwining thing on multiple levels. And I think that's something cool about just how I've structured Ridalian without, I don't want to sound like I'm tooting my own horn or anything, but I like how I've designed like a pyramid of conflict. And I think that's really cool. Right. So you got like conflict between, peasants and peasants, the farmers fighting the goblins, or the farmers dealing with this manicore that's just ravaging their farm houses and farm side, eating all their crops or livestock or whatever. You got that conflict, and then you have a conflict between two noble lords within one of the kingdoms that are arguing over some sort of land or gold or taxes or whatever. So you have you got like a peasant conflict, you have a noble conflict, and then you get on up and you've got two different factions or kingdoms that are arguing. So now you have a king level conflict between two kings, and it's just cool how it just continues to, it's like an upside down pyramid. It starts out so small and then it just continues to build, and then you get to like where you have gods and devils and goddesses and all those types of things that are having a conflict, and it just continues to build. And it's like, where do you place all of these important people as you go throughout this? And I think it's super cool to have multiple conflicts on multiple levels that all affect each other. So I think that the reason, how I designed it, my pantheon of god and goddesses, would be with an opposite equal in mind that prevents one god from being supreme over everything. So, and you'll see.
Yeah, and I think that's another good point with it. It's like, say at the start or whatever, if they're in some sort of village and there's like a literal just like child outside or whatever, not part of the story in any way, that like one character has no more, I guess, like immortality compared to like the big bad evil guy, planned out for the end or whatever.
Yeah. Like
any sort of action can still change something.
Yeah.
With any of it, which can branch out and go and go and go.
I think fluidity is the word I like to use, because it's ever changing. It's like water. The world can shift and move ever how I want it, because there's not a there's not a predetermined outcome, I guess, so to speak. I mean, when when I'm DMing and I'm writing these campaigns, I have a beginning and an end. But now, I mean, I certain actions and things. I'm not going to limit my players because I hate that. I want them to feel like they can change the world if they want, or whatever they're doing. I want them to feel like it's changing something, if that's their desire. Mm-hmm. So, I would say I have an outcome in mind. I kind of know what's going to happen. At least I know things that are going to happen, and I kind of have like a guess of what they're going to kind of do. But the coolest part is when they find an outcome, or they do some sort of outcome that I had no idea about. And then as a DM, you're sitting there, you're like, wait a minute, I didn't, you know what I mean? Like I never thought of this being a possible outcome, and then that's really cool. So.
Yeah, that's another thing I was thinking of is like from the little bit that I've edited through or watched or just heard from everybody else of the times that maybe there's a pretty obvious advantage to doing a certain thing, whether it's doing somebody wrong or whatever it might be. There's always still that little bit of like a thought in the back of your mind, like, well, the way Evan sets this stuff up is it could completely ruin us in the end, and it might be 2 or 3 gold now or something like that. I think it sort of puts people back to like their central compass of their character, instead of acting out almost as more of, well, what would they truly hardly do instead of what I might want to do to get an advantage.
Right. I think one of my favorite things, and you guys that watch, you guys didn't get to see the first initial campaigns and the initial stories in Manola that the guys played through. But I love callbacks. So as you guys watch, there will be certain times when Hunter, Travis, Robert, or like whenever you and Mitch are able to join into the game. When that happens, there will be names, last names, first names, or events and stuff that their names have echoed throughout the centuries within the world, and it's so cool. I can't remember which episode it is. It's one of the early episodes. I'm not going to give it away. Even if I did remember, I'm not going to spoil it. So, but anyway, in one of the earlier episodes, there was a callback, and Travis didn't get it at first. Travis was like, wait, his face was like, okay, I've heard that before. And then he's like shuffling back through his entire notebook of notes because, I mean, like you were saying, I'll just do like one small little tidbit of information that may affect something major down the line. And I like that aspect as well, to like let some nonchalant decision be made and them as a party think, whatever. But then later on, when something happens, they're like, no. Then I tell them, well, you guys decided to do this. And they're like, that whole thing's cool. And then I love callbacks. So there's one point where Travis was searching back through his notes and he was like, man, I could just see it on his face like, I've heard that, but I don't even think it's this campaign. So he's like digging through, and then Hunter had remembered, and Hunter's like, he just kind of gives me that look, like, is that who I think it is? You know what I mean? So those types of things are really cool.
Yeah, I know. One thing I've already picked up on is if all the players are bringing notebooks to play a game, then the story's going the right direction, at least a little bit.
Yeah, I guess it's probably too much, but.
Moving on from that one, what was the inspiration for designing a part of Ridalian as an archipelago named Manola?
So, I'd read through a lot of the pre-made campaigns and different things, and I'm a huge Pirates of the Caribbean nerd. So, I don't know. I really like the boating aspect. I would be a beach bum myself if I could. That's where I would be all the time. So I think the inspiration of making an archipelago was really cool to me because I can separate factions completely out. And they can have coast to coast to where, I don't know, like maybe you would think, okay, this faction's all together. They have all their stuff straight, they have their own government, all this stuff, but even though they're coast to coast, they still have internal conflicts. So, I don't know, I like that. I like the
Yeah, you're putting a world of diversity within like traveling distance for your party still.
right, and I can really so I think when you separate things out, cultures don't directly mix or affect each other as much. So, for instance, just kind of like a little tidbit of some of their backstories. Travis's character, where he's from, has more of a like Japanese, ancient Japanese kind of culture. Like their traditions and their style of life and those types of things you can be found there in the Goli Meadows and Forbolgia. So you have that style, and then it's funny to see like where Hunter's character's from is very much like a naturistic place, like what you would imagine, the common elf tradition, one with nature, and they build all of their stuff within nature itself. So that's kind of where she comes from, with a little mix of human influence just based on where she's at. And as as the campaign progresses, you all will get to explore more of that, I think, depending on where they go. So I think that being able to separate those things out, it allows me to pull in a lot of different cultures. And it's cool because, I don't know who's going to watch these videos. I don't know who's going to watch our campaign or whatever. But, if I can touch on different cultures and places and things that people can recognize or be familiar with, I think that's cool because it's like, it's reaching out. And even though it's a complete fantasy made up world, somebody might be like, oh man, that's just like this when I was growing up, or we do that on the basis. That's cool that he's from Tennessee in the middle of the South and he's able to recognize this. So those types of things are really cool.
Yeah, being able to find like a familiar piece of yourself throughout a story, I know it really helps with people sort of have it developing like a favorite character or becoming like emotionally interested, as it feels like it could be your neighbor or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Which you talked about, Hunter's character being from like a traditional elven sort of idea. What about the other factions, nations, or species, or anything like that that's sort of been paired together?
So, when I was first putting all this together, I wanted to pull in. I wanted it to make sense, I guess. So, I knew that there was a trilogy of gods, if you will, that first kind of pulled Manola. So, I'll just give like a small snippet, because eventually I'll probably publish like some kind of creation story or poem or something.
Yeah.
We'll have a cool little video or something. But, Manola, if you would imagine, I dreamed up, everybody's like, well, space has all these floating rocks in it that can get pulled into a galaxy that's centered around a star, and then they start formulating atmospheres and get their round shape as they orbit and all this stuff. But I thought, what if space was different? What would I make it? So, and that's me. That's how I think, is I want to...
What a question to ask yourself.
Let me drop this on NASA right quick. What if space was different? How would it work? So, anyway, I thought, what if the space outside the worlds was just like a big ocean or a big puddle? And gods, when they decided they were ready to create, they went and they just like picked up something out of the puddle, and they were like, oh yeah, this is it. And so then they bring it up, and then they set it where they want to set it, and then they craft it. I just think that's cool, because that's what a DM does. I pick up something that I like out of this enormous puddle or pool of fantastical impossibilities. I pick it up, and then I craft it to what I want. So I was playing Bahamut and was like, okay, so Bahamut's going to pick this up along with Corellin and Muradin, which are the first trilogy of upright gods that build Ridalian, and in turn build Manola. So Manola was probably one of the first. I think that's what all, history-wise, Manola will have been like the first place created by this trilogy of gods. And when they created this place, they they built their own. Like Corellin built the elves, Bahamut built the tieflings, which I think is awesome, because that's like a conflict between Forgotten Realms lore, and everybody's like, no, that's not right, that's not fair. Well, yeah, it is, because this is my world. So, it's that aspect of it. And so I have like the tieflings and the elves as the first. And eventually later on comes the humans and the dwarves and, blah, 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 as we get in a line. And then I have all the races, some shape, form, fashion. I have their backgrounds, how they come about, how they come to be, which can be discovered depending on what the party does. And I think that's basically it. And, different gods come into play. And something that's cool about how Manola was configured. I'm not going to spoil it. We'll wait. We'll wait on that. I'm not going to spoil that.
So moving on away from, how these areas are separated, what about the problems? More so, what's actually going together, and how do you determine with what side is with who and all that sort of stuff?
So when I was trying to place this, it ended up being kind of Lord of the Rings-ish, or World of Warcraft-ish, you know what I mean? Kind of putting different things. I don't know. This kind of plays off of question one a little bit, because when I was separating all these out, designing the factions, I coupled like-mindedness, governments, kind of how these different factions run themselves. It would make sense for them to align, because certain factions crave power, some greed, some they just want to conquer. They have all these different initiatives and different things that they want. So when we were going through when I was going through it, trying to decide who was where, how they're going to be aligned to different things, elves are. I feel like humans and elves are hard, because certain sections or certain packs or sects or however you want to word it of humans behave so differently, and it's so found in our world today, because the cultures between the Western Hemisphere or the Eastern Hemisphere, Northern, just whatever it is, however it's made up or worded or separated, there's such a big difference in how they act. And I wanted to have that, even though we're all humans, there's so much different. So there's a few different human cultures within Manola. For instance, you got the Sons of the Wolf that have sort of like a monarchy style tradition that often have trouble with a neighboring faction, and they're divided by small mountain chains. So there's just like a difference in government there, a difference in how things should be ran, and it's kind of like each side is trying to impress their views, which is like a real world thing. And it's cool just to see how it plays out fantasy-wise. And then
there's no just blue against red or anything like that. You've got everybody from everywhere with different problems.
Yeah, and then you have Stamrin, the Kingdom of Stamrin, which is just massive, and for so long they have been like, I don't want to say the America of the world, but they have been like the do-gooders, you know what I mean? Like, they try to help out the ones that need help. They try to protect those that need to be protected. They always answer the call for justice. That's their mantra. And it's cool to see how other factions, when I was designing through it, could rely on Stamrin if they wanted to. And so you got to develop a culture. For instance, there's the Stormberg Empire, which is, it has an emperor and things like that. And they have just for so long said, no, we're not relying on Stamrin. We're going to stand up to whatever it is ourselves. We do not need that help. Kind of like an ornery old man that doesn't want to ask for help from the outside. So it's just cool to have that. And then the elves, I feel like elves are so different, because you have the Drow elves who, they live a lot in underground, but in Manola they have been spread out, kind of amongst the world, because they were judged and looked at as outsiders, kind of to the normal high elf kind of population, and then the wood elves kind of took them in, and then it's a bunch of lore that's in there. If the party goes to the Manola Wale jungle, you'll get more. But it's really cool how the Drows have integrated themselves within the entirety world of Manola. And I'll give this a little tidbit. All Drows within the world are their own nation. One nation that they're limitless. They don't have boundaries and lands and different things like all these other factions are like, okay, yeah, well, I own from this mountain to this sea and from this sea to this desert. This is the kingdom of Stamrin. Drows are like, where I am is my kingdom, bro. You know what I mean? And that's really cool to have that. So, the differences is basically just the cultures that I signed them. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how it played out.
So moving on from the factions and the conflicts themselves, how does the overall history of Manola look?
So, like we were kind of talking before, there was a creation cycle where the trilogy of gods pulled Manola out of the great puddle, if you will, and crafted it in the way that they saw fit. And so as the nations begin to develop and form cultures and develop their kingdoms and stuff, they begin to spread out from where the gods had designed them initially and placed them. So throughout the timeline, there's various... It very much mirrors like the medieval and ancient days. So you have like the caveman period where all these different races or species are like trying to figure out what they're doing in the world, how they're going to affect the world, how they're going to shape their area, and all those different things, while the gods are continuing to create. And they go through like a Renaissance, Dark Ages, Renaissance, Enlightenment. Eventually, which is where the current campaign is unfortunately the archipelago of Manola has broke out into the era of war. So basically, when all of these different areas develop, they go through their own cycle, and eventually there's like a one world Congress kind of thing. Everyone kind of knows, okay, across Manola is this. We've sent our scouts out. We have ambassadors and embassies built here and there. We have sorcerers and wizards that can move place to place within the archipelago, and we can communicate between and all these different things, so they like understand what's going on.
Right.
I don't know. Well, let's just give them a taste of it. Like, it's something we've been working on. We've been wanting to show you guys. Let's just give you a taste of it.
There are legends and stories wrapped into great songs, sung by bards for all to hear. These stories tell those of great warriors, evil tyrants, brave children, and cowardly kings. Thrones and treasures cause wars, gods and devils play bring destruction. The desires of a dark soul may bring annihilation, while the bright heart of a boy king will try and save it. Men and women of nations answer the call to arms, to fight for their country, their home, their families. Marching to the sound of a war drum, the billowing of a ship's sail, under the great radiant one, under chords thunders in the dead of night. The sound of rain hitting metal as a soldier readies his shield, as he stares into the orcish faces of the legion. The guttural war cries strike his heart with fear, but his young king saddles his warhorse and rallies together. A half-elven arcanist prepares a ritual in case the unblemished get too close. Lord and Chief Theophi checks his coalition of half-bloods and those await across the meadows with means to end him. Matthias stares into the burning pit, containing a great scourge on the land. he with his princes of peace delve into the devil's hell to put an end to the rebirth of evil. Micah, in his old age, stands strong in his armor as Hector, the tyrant, assaults the dark demon. With the shadow soldiers slaying the tyrant and ending the shadows, light shines once again. I am here to tell you a story, one of love, triumph, justice, and tragedy. A story that will echo throughout eternity. Cross every sea, ride every cloud, from the Isles of Satonia to the great city of Stamrin. Heroes and villains, husbands and wives, brothers and sisters all play their part. As Bahamut sits on his throne in Elysia, and the evil one fights his way out of hell, a group of misfits find their way through the valleys, the meadows, the mountains, and seas. I am here to tell your story. By the fire in every tavern, the square in every town, or the stage in every city I come to. What's in those stories for me to tell is entirely up to you. Welcome to Manola.
Hopefully that intro will give some more info on all of the conflicts and histories a bit more. But what about the seasons and the days that the campaign may experience? I know a lot of times you get caught, so much in the story that, maybe 3 or 4 feet of snow may, throw a little wrench in people's plans sometimes.
Yeah, so I kind of based, let's see, gosh, I need to pull up the calendar and actually look. But anyway, I've got it based off a 28-day cycle, kind of. And when I was designing it, especially with our weather in Tennessee and how our climate fluctuates, it was kind of fun because I have like first summer, second summer, third summer, but in between first summer and third summer, there's like a spring and then like a first winter because we don't really have fall anymore. It's like 90 degrees and the next day it's 30. So it was just kind of fun and cool to have that. The days, the months are all kind of broken up into that cycle. I like to name them after cool things that happened within the world and within the gods that are worshipped themselves from the pantheon. I think that it's cool to integrate all that stuff because, again, reaching back to the Nordic stuff, that's why we have Thor's Day, Thursday, Friday. That's why I sing Friday, and I think that that's cool to have that stuff.
And on to the next thing. What is the plasmosphere and the Day of Chaos?
So, really, the Day of Chaos comes first. It's kind of... The Day of Chaos is when, as the gods were creating, Manola was already its own thing. But the gods hadn't finished creating other parts of the world, which... Is it spoiler alert? No, it's not spoiler alert. Eventually, maybe. The outline.
Teaser alert.
Teaser alert. The outline of Campaign 2 is already being formulated, and it's a continent called Camelstra, which will be added on later or something pretty cool. But anyway, it's instead of an archipelago, it's going to be a massive continent, which will be a little different than the archipelago, different style things. It'll be cool to see. But so the gods were elsewhere creating in Ridalian, and they unearthed some terrible entities, such as a evil god named Bane, along with a whole host of terrible gods and good gods. So what was cool was what Bahamut, Moradin, and Corellin pulled out of the Great Puddle was actually an encasement of all of these gods from something that happened even before the world was made, which, that's just something cool that I can play off of later on. So basically, the Day of Chaos is when all of these unearthed bad I don't really like the bad word, the fallen or whatever gods revolted. Because Bahamut had already created his heavenly home called Elysia. And Bane decided that he wanted to be in Elysia. And so there was this massive god-scale war that broke out, and Manola was left in the crosshairs and became the battleground. Various regions of Manola echo the results of this conflict. In fact, the ribs of Manola was the form that Bane chose to take when he was assaulting Bahamut, was the form of a humongous dragon. And when he was killed, the ribs didn't sink all the way into the sea, and now that's a piece of the land, which I think is really cool. And there's other various things. I'll give away the ribs just because it's kind of obvious in the way they're shaped, and that one's cool. But eventually, like if the watcher takes time to actually look at the map, they might be able to formulate their own ideas of what was pieces of what. I don't know, just kind of cool little tidbits like that. But the Day of Chaos is basically when that happened, and Bahamut, Corellin, and Moradin chose to make a barrier to protect what they had already created in Manola, to protect it from the outside. And what's cool is Bahamut kind of encapsulated Elysia in a section of the plasma sphere, but it's on the outside of the world of Ridalian as well. So, I keep saying Manola, but Ridalian is the entire plasma sphere takes hold over Ridalian as a whole. So the plasma sphere is like a divine barrier that won't allow gods to pass in or out, giving ultimate protection to those creatures on Ridalian. But good or bad gods can project themselves in visions or avatars. They can still cast some of their powers. It's not as strong as it could be, I guess you could say. And who knows? I don't know if the plasma sphere has a way to be destroyed or not. Well, that's something we'll cross when we get to it. So that's kind of what those two things are.
And to break the fourth wall a little bit, what would a new watcher, whether it be a Dungeons and Dragons player or anybody in the whole tabletop RPG sort of thing, anybody who may just stumble into one of these videos, what would they find in the world of Ridalian? And what is your favorite faction?
Well, start off with my favorite faction. My favorite faction is going to be the Kingdom of Stammering, and just because probably I have the most amount of lore. I, as a DM, some of the previous campaigns, I got to play a lot of the characters that had direct influence on the Kingdom of Stammering. I don't know. I just like, it's kind of like the center part of the world.
It's fun to be.
Yeah,
it's fun to be a fan of the powerhouse. Yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say that they're a powerhouse because they've been pushed around and taken over before. So they're not invincible or anything. It's Bahamut's chosen people, and Bahamut's probably my favorite god. So of course, a lot of the things are going to align to where I like Stammering.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I like the structure. I like where it's at. I like how I have their culture set up. I like their influence on the world. I like all these things that play into it. But what a new player would get by coming and checking us out, or not necessarily a new player, a new viewer, or just anyone that stumbles across this. Basically what you're going to get is you're going to get a story. And it's in hopes to get a story that gives you tragedies and comedies and drama, and it's going to pull on your heart in certain ways, and it's going to make you laugh at another time, and then it's going to put you in suspense, and then it's going to make you wanting to know what happens next and be waiting for more and more and more. I want it to be like a book that you listen to, like an audio book. And I hope that's what people find. I hope that we are able to deliver a story that has several elements of randomness that's decided by a dice roll. I think that's super cool to have that variable placed into a story, because it could change the story on the whim. Someone rolls a natural 20 to convince a king to do something versus a natural 1 to try to make a king not do something. I mean, that could totally change what happens in the story or where the party goes. And I present them with two different options when neither one of them really seems good or bad. They make their decision based on what they have and what they know, unknowing of what effects it's going to have later on. And plus, I mean...
Right, and I know from like a previous campaign, I know like whenever it was being played, it was still, the next session was maybe a week or so out, and all the players were, communicating and texting throughout the week trying to figure out, what the plan was going to be for a whole week away and stuff.
See, I love that. I love, the
buying in factor of it.
Yeah, I'm a big puzzle guy too, so, and, for my players, they have, they know me, so, they kind of have an advantage that the audience doesn't, just based on they know how I kind of work, they know what I like, they know those things, so I have to be extra creative for them to throw them off and deceptive to keep maybe a really cool thing from being spooled too early, especially from Hunter. Hunter figures out a lot of things early. He links a lot of things, but I've also known him for 20 plus years, so I feel like a new watcher that watched it, they would get a good story, original story that has multiple surprise elements, and they would get to embrace into just an awesome thing with a bunch of guys that just get to hang out, best friends, and play D&D together. I mean, it's just cool to have that relationship, to show love to each other and then to anyone watching. And I don't know, it's got that awesome bro or friend or buddy, or if any of our sisters or wives or whatever want to play, let's do it. The more the merrier.
Yeah.
We want to have as many as we can. So I don't know. I feel like they'd get a really good story, and in hopes eventually our listeners or watchers or whatever might be able to play a part in the story. So that's something that's in the works. And we'll see what happens.
To wrap all this up, what does being the game master for the Chaotic Cast TV mean to you?
Being the game master. Let me start it off with, I love being the game master. I love writing the story. I write this stuff just because I like to. It's kind of like a hobby. And what it means to me is being able to spill my brain out onto the table and just see my imagination have an effect on others' imagination, to get to see what I dream up or what I formulate in my head play out in like a real world or a fantasy world situation, to where real players are navigating it. They're making decisions based on all these things that I've made up in my head. I don't know. It's really cool. It's kind of weird and super nerdy, but I love it. You know what I mean? Like, I love the nerdiness. So I think that it's being Chaotic Cast to me, man, it's just a blessing. Like, it's awesome to be able to get to play together with a bunch of guys that grew up with, and I hope it evolves to like family, the wives, or just friends, anyone that wants to play, come sit at our table, let's do something. I love the fact that we have a campaign 1, and then spoiler alert, we're going to have some other things going on, content wise, but I think being the Chaotic Cast TV DM, which is like a mouthful, but I think being that it's fun. Like, I just have a blast getting to watch what happens because it's almost like, I get to set up this story, but then I don't get to cast the characters. Like, I get to just watch to see what happens. And, we are able to afford the ability to put this out there on YouTube. And, I think one of the questions that we came up with in our Get to Know the Chaos, which is like our Meet the Players type videos, I think one of the questions at the end of it was like, what does the audience mean to you? And, a lot of the players are like, the audience is important to us, because we wouldn't be doing this and putting it on the internet if we didn't care some,
Yeah, if we didn't want to share
right.
anything. Yeah.
But it's not so much that we're looking for audience approval, or, we're looking for, like we need that to keep playing our game. You know what I mean? We're going to play our game because we like to hang out together and we like to be a part of it. But I've just seen the effects that D&D can have on the community, especially people that are going through hard times, difficult times, especially during the pandemic. There's a lot of people that weren't able to get out and about, and a lot of depression and anxiety, and a lot of different things set in. And if we can be something that provides some sort of relief to that, if we can be a part to where somebody can just get out of the real world, they can jump in this fantasy world, they can like start soaking in and absorbing this story, and then my hopes is eventually one day that our listeners and audience and people that watch, they can have direct effect on it, some sort, form, or fashion. But not only have, like, whether it's like help me do encounters, like maybe put out like a Twitter poll or Instagram poll or something, just to see what we can come up with together, because the more imagination that you have, the better. You can never have enough. And just to be in the community out there, and I think we've all been through times in our lives where we just had to get away, sort of. And I've used D&D for that. I've used it to just to get away from the real world. I think a lot of D&D players have watched a lot of Critical Role, probably because that's like the biggest show. And then for me personally, more on like a personal level, I've been in touch and watched a lot of Realmsmith stuff. And huge shout out to those guys, what they stand for. Jason's like a big brother to me, so to speak. We talk on Instagram and stuff sometimes. But I don't know. I really think, if what it means to me is to be able to be there for someone else who needs it. And that's my goal. It's not so much of I want to get out here and toot my own horn because I think I'm a good writer, or I think I have, this awesome group that is just better at D&D than everyone. No, we screw things up every time we play. We're just there for a good story, man, and I just hope that if somebody's in like a difficult spot, a bad situation, that if they find us, they can be like, you know what, these guys are cool, I like this story, I'm going to listen, I'm going to subscribe, I'm going to like for us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's just fun. It's just fun to be able to get out in the world, and my hopes are eventually maybe someday getting to play with some of these big name D&D players. I think that would be super cool to, someone be like, hey, will you come and just play this NPC for an episode, or will you do this, or show up and do, whatever, or do you want to be a character on this new thing coming on, or if D&D is ever like, hey, you want us, or can we stream you on Twitch at your hour, you know what I mean? All that stuff would be super cool. Yeah. Just because what Dungeons and Dragons means to the world, these type of things can really affect lives majorly, especially things that are this integrated in the community to where people can rely upon it as like it's almost like a therapy to me, like it's awesome just to be able to get away. So that's what it means.
Yeah, just to touch on the audience thing too, when you have when you have a game like this set up, when it relies on a lot of, not necessarily people playing it, but more so people, going the extra step to think of a strategy, or, maybe perform an act or something that's more true to their character than something they would normally do. When you have something like that, and then you're able to add, 1, 2, 5, 10, up to hundreds or thousands of people, and everybody starts buying in, it just makes it grow.
Yeah, it's like
to even a greater extent.
I know just for our group in general, we grew up together. We were super close. I never thought that there would be a day where we wouldn't talk every day. And that's kind of what happened, everyone goes their own ways in life, and you branch out and you start chasing your paths, whether it's a career path or it's a family path or a career then family or a family then career or, just whatever you're doing, it doesn't leave time for other things. And I feel like D&D is that placeholder for us. It got us all back together to where we're in a constant group text talking. We're I'm always asking players, like, send them like little visions or something that maybe specifically pertains to their character, or asking, maybe, when we were talking about a certain character's backstory, just be like, hey, when this happened, did you want this thing to happen or this thing to happen? It's given us more to be together with. I know that that's a weird sentence.
Yeah.
But, really, it really has. And if we can do that on a large scale, where audience from across America, across North America, across the world wants to be a part of it, what more could you ask for? Because it's just awesome.
Yeah. And with that, it's time to wrap this up. Thanks to Evan for taking the time to let us peek into the crazy world he's developed, along with the plans and aspirations that we as a group have for this journey. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for episode 1.
September 1st.
Huh?